right, we're going live. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you for joining me, those who patiently waited so far. Welcome to Dorsey's Resource. The topic of this video is going to be business law, private side, how this deals with redemption education. I have some notes prepared that I wanted to address. Once again, I'm sorry I'm late. Appreciate you all for joining me, by the way. Thank you. So without further ado, as usual, this video is going to be for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. Please understand everyone's individual circumstance or situation may be different. It's up to every individual competent person to please do his or her own homework and research regarding the matter being discussed. This information is not to be construed as legal advice. In any event you feel you need to seek a competent professional, it is encouraged you do so at one's own leisure. Dorsey's Resource Channel is not liable or responsible for anyone's misuse of this information. Please keep in mind everyone is responsible for their own affairs. With that being said, all rights are reserved. I have some notes, so just bear with me a second. Draw connection. Okay. Wanted to draw the connection between business law. Wanted to go over this again, the connection to operating sovereign. Once again, the topic of this video is going to be business law, private side in parentheses, is redemption education. I wanted to address the private side that's related, dealing with these books. This is an older version. So hopefully everyone's well. Happy equinox as we're into the spring solstice. Greetings to you, Mary, in the chat. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you all who've waited thus far. By the way, so let me start off by saying there is an agenda to keep the masses of the population illiterate to this type of education. They don't want you to have the knowledge of the private sector, and I'm not referring to the one that's public, by the way. The reason this is difficult for some people to grasp, it takes effort and learning the difference with the private side and distinguishing how you operate contract-wise. If you learn, study, research this type of information dealing with this craft, this is there's a reason why this is difficult for some people to grasp, to try to learn the difference between the two. So I'm here. The reason I'm doing this video, I'm going to try to bridge the gap with that and trying to assist you all in that regard. By the way, this you also have to unlearn what you've been taught. It's not entirely accurate pertaining to how you conduct business in the public sector. For example, you may not have been taught how to engage in commerce privately through the use of proper entities to shield the in lingus, aka some refer to as the straw man, but the proper court terminology in legalese is referred to as the in lingus. They also refer to as the legal fiction, legal person. By the way, according to their language, is against their rules to recognize certain types of terminology. I've heard, I read when I started learning about this information earlier on, and the few information that was available at the time in cracking the code. Hopefully I have the book around somewhere, by the way. See if it's up here. This is the third edition. This is an older book. This is like the older version of one of these manuals, by the way. There's another manual too. Probably should pull all of these out. So bear with me. It's a lot of action-packed information I may be able to go over to get a hold of, but it's related to this information. So put that over here. So this book, Cracking the Code, is related to, this is one of the original versions. This is like a newer version, by the way. To give you guys an idea, I wanted to show a visual to show. So this information, you're not going to learn this in the school system, by the way. This is why in the previous video, I was giving you guys a sneak preview, the video that I shot last night going into early this morning while I was at work, actually. By the way, that's the video right before this video. I had, like I said, planned on coming before you all. I had some notes prepared, by the way. I've since added material to kind of give a better understanding for those who have not been properly educated on this type of information, by the way, and some of the experiences I've had. I may talk about that as well, by the way. So once again, I wanted to show those books to illustrate there's study material out here, things to try to help give you a better idea how to distinguish the court term, the in lingus, aka legal fiction, from these adhesion contracts. There's also a document you can find online to look up the history behind what some refer to as the straw man. There's a term called capitis diminutio maxima that refers to, there's rules of grammar that refers to why the name is placed in all capital letters, contrary to popular belief. Some people said that doesn't mean anything. I'm here to say that's not true. That is incorrect. That everything has a meaning behind the reason why the name has been placed in all caps. By the way, that hasn't been done by mistake. By the way, so B Duff in the chat says, why is it important information to know? How can average people apply this information to better one's life? That is a good question, by the way, B Duff. Why is it important to know? The reason why, for someone like me, by the way, or I can't speak for everyone else, but the reason it's important is the reason when you enter into different contracts in commerce, depends on what type of background. Some people, this information may not be for them. As I kind of stated briefly earlier, you have to kind of unlearn what you've been taught. But what many don't understand, and I have evidence. I do have some other documentation with me that I can present later. If you watch my previous videos, if you know, I had, just to give you a little background about myself, I don't know how long you've been following the channel, how long, if you've been subscribed, because I can't tell behind, the name, the screen name of the account. But I think in my opinion, it's very important. I've had people, you read some of the previous comments, people thank me for the information, for sharing what I've shared, even in some of my more recent videos. There is a reason why I think the information is important, but to each his own individual. Is one of the things offhand, and trying to attempting to answer your question, is when you enter into commerce, you engage in different types of contracts. You can, if they are not properly done a certain way, by the way, it's the reason I put this out, get to this layer. These are some. Those are some props that I had. I was going to discuss. One of the reasons I was a little late, I had got contacted by an old friend. Was going to maybe discuss maybe later on. I had planned in doing this video, but to try to stay on topic, stay on track. This information is important in correcting one's status. I learned everyone has to do their own research. This is why I gave a disclaimer. There are other channels and people out there you guys may already be aware of who teach this type of information, dealing with some call sovereignty, redemption, secured party creditor process, whatever name they label it, by the way. And the second part of your question was, how can the average people apply this information? And I can go into more detail about, but in case you're not familiar, this is why I'm going over these books. You actually might be able to find a PDF file, free version of this online, by the way. This is the third edition, by the way. I think this edition included a promissory note. This was like upgraded information. The second edition had the similar logo, by the way, but this is one of the original redemption manuals. I'm not sure of the exact year. I think this was released sometime in the early 2000s. This information was underground, and kind of one of the reasons why I spoke, why I did the video last night to give you all a sneak preview. I discussed Pastor Lindsey Williams, by the way, and I'll type the name in the chat in case you're not familiar with who he is. He's a whistleblower that was a chaplain that lived with the elite of the world at the Alaskan pipeline. He's done DVDs many years ago, maybe written books based on information that his elite friends gave him. I'm painting a picture for you. This information is important, by the way. And I know some may seem like, hey, this is not relevant at all. But however, over time, I'm building a picture for you guys, for you all to study, by the way. Get put in here. Look up on YouTube or online. Ooh, typo. Okay, see Gretchen Helm in the chat says, peace, God, appreciate you. Thank you, Gretchen. Appreciate you for joining. So the reason why I feel personally this information is important, I think for those out there who were aware the way that we've been taught to operate in commerce growing up, there's traps that are set for you may be unaware of. If you operate a certain way based on how you sign your name. I'm actually going to answer that question with the notes that I'm going over. B Duff says, Dorsey, thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. I appreciate you, brother. No problem. It's a good question, relevant question, because when I did the video last night, I explained I have like one of my best friends. He actually called me earlier today. I was speaking to for a while before I recorded this video, and then I got text from another best friend I hadn't spoken to in many years that reached out to me, by the way, I needed to get back with on the gram. Big shout out to him. That's why I pulled out some of these props, by the way. I might, if I have time, to go over my connections to the music industry group that I was part of some years ago, a rap group, by the way. And I may touch on a little bit of that, but the topic of this video is pertaining to business and law, which is this subject right here is the private side. There's a private side. When people take this class, this is an older book. A lot of people, when they go through law school, what I'm learning so far from the research, the forensic research investigation that I've been doing lately and trying to understand this information better and explain to people that UCC filing UCC financing statements is not nothing illegal. You shouldn't feel like that's not something that you cannot do. By the way, this is something you were supposed to have access to. And it's a reason why we took these classes in high school or college. I was contacted by a subscriber who confirmed to me a while ago. He teaches classes on how to obtain high lines of corporate credit, which I think there's a difference between corporate credit versus business credit. Corporate credit, you can get larger lines of credit. That's something a while ago when I had stated in one of my previous videos that I had come across some new information how they hid this from us. And I may address and try to break that down. That's what I'm attempting to do, by the way. So I'm tying the connection, this information, this particular book has chapters that are related to different subjects that people study in the so-called sovereignty, redemption movement education. It's hidden within this course, this class, and you may be able to find PDF copies for free online. I had a subscriber, someone that mentioned in a previous video, they heard me go over this a while ago. This is why I've been doing videos lately, to show you guys evidence that this information is real. But this subscriber who does private classes, does Zoom meetings, Facebook meetings to teach corporate credit, where you can get larger lines of credit, I think, versus business credit. He confirmed to me at one time they taught this in not only colleges, but high school many years ago. It's like it's hiding in plain sight. Then they took it out the schools for a while. Then he said they brought it back. He even mentioned even as far back as the 50s. He said, I think sometime in the 60s, they took it out. This book is based in the 70s era. Actually, some years ago, I was with someone. I was downtown Detroit at a bookstore where they give away tons of books. They have like old books where people, donate books, and they have like a rack, a section, because their stores like flooded with tons of books. So I was perusing through to look for different books, because this is how a friend of mine states he does research, someone that I've known for a long time. By the way, I won't say their name. Certain people I keep private. He's very knowledgeable, elder, I would say, very well studied, by the way. And I showed him, I saw this, came across this on the rack, and I saw a copy, a version of a UCC, what appeared to be a UCC financing statement. By the way, I'll try to scroll through and show you all. By the way, wanted to provide validity, but this book also talks about contract law. This is connected to, by the way. It's like they hid, this is proof how they hid this redemption education. Because this gentleman also stated to me, when we used to attend these private meetings many years ago, he stated that there was someone that attended the private meetings that stated they actually took this information during their college days. They recognized this information that was being taught. And back then it was on a word of mouth, need to know basis. By the way, it was private. Okay, here it is. By the way, I'll hold it up to the camera so you guys can see. But this was a version, I guess an older version. You see a financing statement, by the way. Hold it up to the camera. And this chapter, this dealt with commercial paper, but I think this chapter was on secured transactions. There's a relation. In many of the updated books, the chapter that generally goes over UCC financing statements will be called secured transactions, by the way. And you can even look up on YouTube, by the way. I discovered from typing in secure transactions, from doing additional research, even recently, by the way, it talks about how you file property. What you're doing, you're putting your state that you reside in on notice when you're doing business, you're doing commerce, when you engage in contracts, by the way, which I know we're moving into a digital age, but things they file or maybe digitize it, put it on microfilm, whatever. You're making a public record, by the way, but you're putting the state on notice that you, as a secured party, you have a vested interest in a property, and this property is a good. One of the things why it's important to learn this information, why we've been taught wrong, did you know your signature is actually property as well? It's not just the estate, real estate. If you think tangible goods. In this book, this information talks about tangible and intangible goods. Like some people refer to cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, as intangible currencies. Intangible is something you can't touch. Tangible, of course, is something solid, physical, you can actually touch, you can hold. So there's different types of property and how you contract, how you engage in these contracts, between, just giving you guys an example and understanding the terminology between tangible and intangible goods. So you're putting the state on notice that you as a secured party creditor, do you consider yourself as a borrower or a lender? These terms are synonymous with each other. Lessor and lessee, bailey, bailor, for example. You see, are you on the debtor or creditor side of the relationship, by the way? But there's actually sort of like a third party. They tricked you into signing as a surety to be liable on behalf of the legal entity, the all caps name, where the court terminology is the in lingus. Many refer to as the straw man, but the proper legal terminology is in lingus, by the way. See some more in the chat. Something like says, I got that book used from Amazon for cheap. Okay, awesome. Something like says, thanks for the suggestion. That's good. You're doing a research. Jerry Holt says, peace and blessings. Appreciate you. Peace and blessings to you, by the way, for joining. So to get back into the notes, I'm going over the private side connection with this book. So once again, many have not been taught how to engage in commerce privately through the use of proper entities to shield their in lingus, aka legal fiction, from these adhesion contracts. So the solution to learning this type of information is also organizing with like-minded people in your city or state. If you can't find out if there's any forums out there, keep in mind there are still Facebook groups that brainstorm and try to assist one another in learning this type of information. You even had different servers on the Discord app where people were conversing with each other, uploading documents to share information with newbies or beginners that were researching this type of information. I know a lot of people are already advanced by now and are looking to further their knowledge into this type of discipline, by the way. When you see many of these get rich quick infomercials on YouTube, or how to get approved for credit cards, or how to invest in the stock market, life insurance, etc., what they're not telling you is that in many cases, majority of cases, those are public side benefit privileges, especially if you had your SSN number attached to those contracts, and you're not properly protected, by the way, with how you're engaging in commerce. By the way, if you can there's those that can interpret what I'm saying. So you might say, Dorsey, what do you mean? Okay, let me explain. What many don't understand is in many cases behind the scenes, these major banks, brokerage firms, by the way, major corporations are selling the instruments that you sign, by the way, that you sign your John Hancock, your signature, that's being securitized on a Circle 750, aka stock market, by the way, and they create derivatives. So you're signing many of these negotiable instruments, certificates of stock, and you're creating derivatives that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange and can actually add to the national deficit. You can look up the nationaldebtclock.org. Last time I checked, we're at over $28 trillion for the national debt. Then it has a breakdown like per citizen, by the way, in case you're curious. Just go on Yahoo or Google search engine, type in nationaldebtclock.org, by the way. So what's going on is this is putting you in a certain status. So you might actually be benefiting, you feel, in a good way, that you're earning maybe a passive income or residual income on the public side. However, once again, if that if these contracts are attached to your legal fiction, you may not be aware if you're getting calls sometimes from debt collectors. If you're noticing, if you're not completely operating a certain way, you're being liable behind the scenes. It's putting you at a certain status, by the way. And let me see what else. So many are unaware the legal fiction is attached to these public side benefit privileges, by the way. In some instances, it does not benefit the average person to be involved in some of these contracts because the state government or your local municipality, corporation is not giving you the equivalent financially of what they're making off of your legal fiction. What they make money off your in lingus, your all caps. So you're not. This is a form of unjust enrichment. You're not being compensated properly as you should be. It's the millions of dollars they make behind the scenes, by the way, off your legal fiction, your in lingus, by the way. So once again, in some instances, it does not benefit the average person to be involved in some of these contracts because the state government or your local municipality, city, corporation is not giving you the equivalent financially of what they're making off your legal fiction in lingus that they're tapping into behind the scenes. Also, in other cases where the Federal Reserve is supposed to provide the remedy for you to discharge, set off your debts, like where they hid the process, how to utilize the private side of the closed checking account, if you know how to properly utilize it to pay off certain debts by doing the transaction a certain way, but bankers are intentionally not being trained on that. And the higher ups at the Federal Reserve have compartmentalized this information. This is a way where they're causing commercial injury, commercial harm. By the way, and there's laws to back up what I'm saying. HJR 192, Public Law 73-10, which is codified in the statutes at large, Statute 4848, Section 112, pursuant to Uniform Commercial Code 3-603, which is codified in Michigan Compiled Law, State Law 440.3603, where you attempt to make a payment, even if the merchant refuses to accept the tender payment, there's still supposed to be a discharge to that amount of tender. They put the remedy within the laws. They codified. And this is not legal advice. I did give a disclaimer, but I'm just referencing pursuant to, you have to do your own research, by the way. So once again, these big corporations that are tapping in, you're not being treated fairly. You're not being fairly compensated. And the Federal Reserve and the Treasury and the IRS has been in on this fraud that's been perpetuated, by the way, in case those are wondering. When you look these laws up, you will better understand how this is taking place, by the way. So, for example, the system, aka these big corporations, they always sell these adhesion contracts off to you as though it's cool. For example, they give you $200 or whatever when you sign up for a new bank account, 2% interest-free loan for the first year, whatever deal. On the public side, they're enticing you on or rewards points, furthermore, for or travel points you get for credit cards. These are benefit privileges that connect your legal fiction to doing business under the corporate U.S. citizen side, the statutory side of the jurisdiction that is enemy of the state pursuant to the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. Every U.S. citizen is an enemy of the state. Was further re-implemented with the Emergency War Powers Act of 1933. When the Federal Reserve was set up in 1913, Federal Reserve Act, that's not a coincidence. Also, the movie Wizard of Oz, by the way, was an illustration of some of the things that they had planned to do. Now, keep in mind, the movie is based off the book, by the way. In case you all don't know, the book precedes the movie, similar to Hunger Games, how Susan Collins wrote the books. Then there was a movie based off the books. Well, many years ago, I think the original Wizard of Oz, the book was released in 1914, and versus the movie, Dorothy had silver slippers. And what the silver represented at the time when she followed the yellow brick road, that represented the silver following the gold out the country. Once the Federal Reserve bankers had taken over, you have to study G. Edward Griffin's material, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And his material was accurate, by the way, contrary to popular belief. There was a gatekeeper agent out there claiming his material was fallacy, that it was fiction. One has to do their own research. I encourage you to, but no, his information is highly accurate. There were bankers that met privately. Think that Jekyll Island was located somewhere in the state of Georgia. By the way, don't quote me exactly. One has to do their own research. By the way, I had an audio that was given to me some years ago. So not only did G. Edward Griffin, he wrote a book, but there was an audio that went along to explain how the international banking cartel, the same cartel that was connected to how they set up central banks around the world, by the way. And they have been one of the causes why there's a new banking system allegedly being implemented. You all may have heard about. There's supposed to be an answer to this. Also, cryptocurrencies or digital currencies are supposed to be illustrative form of answer to counter a lot of the fraud that has been taking place with the Federal Reserve, with them this debt-based system of enslavement, by the way, where they haven't been providing, especially people that have been trying to transition from leaving the public sector into the private sector. They've been intentionally making it difficult by not allowing people to access the remedy by hiding. They've been hiding it intentionally. And this is why what I'm exposing, how they've compartmentalized it, where you have to have a background in certain areas and have certain credentials. And even still, there's many lawyers and judges who may not understand the information because it's compartmentalized. And sometimes you need to be well studied in other disciplines, such as accounting or the securities brokerage field, which these different disciplines overlap. There's 3 disciplines I'm going to address. I have prepared in my notes already. This is one of them, business law, by the way. You also need accounting. My friend's wife gave me her workbook for college. By the way, she's in accounting or studying. By the way, there's a private side to the accounting field. There's CPAs, some out there that have connected the pieces, have been trained in high level information, by the way, or have certain credentials. Now, there's another type of attorney out there called a tax attorney, where they may not only be an accountant, but they also have a licensed bar license, licensed through the Bar Association. By the way, some of them I just found out recently may not be certified public accountants, but they have a background where they do forensic audits, but they have a legal background as well. So both these disciplines are connected. And this book also talks about contracts. Some of the newer updated versions talk about contract law, talk about insurance, different types of insurances. That gets into the securities brokerage field, and how I myself connected the pieces. I had a friend many years ago who worked for a owner of a sports team here in Detroit. By the way, a friend of mine, good friend I've known for a long time. He's since moved out of state. I won't say where he's at. He's no longer in the state. I spoke to recently, not too long ago, and I helped wake him up to this information dealing with redemption many years ago. And he helped me understand, as he learned this information, he helped me connect the pieces where sword sharpens sword, by the way, how this information was related to the securities field, because he sold bonds, by the way, which some argue that the birth certificate is not a bond. However, it is a form of a securities instrument, just like your social security card. So certificated security, it is a form of a securities instrument, by the way, and the two have a correlation. They share a relationship. When you study a background behind how the money's printed, how eventually sent to the DTC, that stands for Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation in New York, I allegedly hear. You can look up information online. Some of this information was already public that you could read online many years ago when I started learning about this information, by the way, and some of it is still out there. There's a guy that has the website Stop the Pirates. I can't think of his name. He has a YouTube channel, or I can't think he's been on YouTube. His site or blog online was called Stop the Pirates. And he has a little bit of education behind the connection with the DTC. That stands for Depository Trust, and you have DTCC, Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. And I want to say that you had this other site where you could look up, allegedly, some would say you would punch in your social security number in the upper right-hand corner, and you can look up what corporations are trading your entity called GMEI Utility. I heard it was GEMI Utility, something like that, because there was some claiming that was not true. But however, I tried it out. If you punch in your SSN number, I think if you use the dashes in the upper right hand corner, so for it to pull up, you might have to put the dashes if you know what your SSN number is, and it'll show you whether it's lapsed for worldwide, different corporations or entities that are trading your name, your Lingus attached to that security, that form of security. So, in explaining the story, this good friend of mine, has a securities license. He had a Series 63. He had a Series 7 brokerage license. He helped me connect the dots. So there was people who were more advanced than myself that I actually shared this with, and it increased their skill set they already had in studying this type of information many years ago. I was on Yusuf's show some years back, and I actually mentioned this on his radio show, High Frequency Radio, by the way, which he does have a YouTube channel, puts out excellent information. And there's others out there that put out good work as well that I commend, that are highly advanced, that I recommend. Big names such as Jonah Bey, Akeem El, that are like masters. They're up there with Yusuf. They put out phenomenal work, very phenomenal. And I want to say there's different processes, there's different procedures. Not all of these procedures are the same. I've been studying this information since 2004. So I have a trained eye. I can distinguish between different processes that have come out there. I've seen the executor letter from David Clarence some years ago. I've watched when Fred and Nina Gutierrez did seminars across the country where they talked about the checks off the closed account. I listened to their work as well. Studied work of the Lakota Nation that was one of the groups that helped pioneer information about the 9/8 number some years ago. Where there was an indigenous Native American group, by the way, that helped pioneer research. So different researchers throughout the years have done research, and there's different groups that brought information together, that information that is privy to members of the ruling class elite. Remember, they're taught by their parents. They're sent to private schools by invitation only. That's why this information is exclusive to them. That's why I went over Pastor Lindsey Williams' information. By the way, look up his work. Look up his DVD called Secrets of the Elite. By the way, if you can still find it, I would highly recommend checking that out. And some of his other work, by the way, will give you an understanding, by the way, that he had experience. He lived with the elite of the world, by the way. They do exist, contrary to popular belief. There's some that try to dismiss it and say that's not real, but he's helped individuals connect the pieces, by the way. Also, check out Aaron Russo's documentary from years back called America, Freedom, and Fascism. I'll type that in the chat section, by the way, so you guys can look that up. You still should be able to pull that up on YouTube, by the way. Rest in peace to Aaron Russo. He was running for governor of Nevada some years ago. This is the story. He actually had produced, he was a Hollywood producer. He produced a movie that Eddie Murphy had starred in years ago, I think, called Changing Lanes, some other films. He was really awake, exposed things pertaining to the IRS and things. He did a documentary some years back. He was contacted by Nick Rockefeller's lawyer from the famous Rockefeller family. He told the story, by the way. This was a documentary he put out. I highly recommend for newbies out there who are trying to connect the pieces and understand this information overlaps. It's related. You have to connect the pieces because it's hidden, but I've discovered that's why I'm going over business and law. You have to study accounting, but there's a private side to the accounting ledger. You have debits and credits. By the way, you have the notes payable ledger, by the way, that pertain to a particular instructor, guru, came out some years ago, did a joint webinar with Yusuf called named Ajamu Bey. Thanks credit to his work he put out, and talked about the notes payable ledger and how he was able to pay off instruments. He was able to enforce it by utilizing his private certified checks. And I actually have that webinar, a couple of those. The first one didn't come out correctly, so him and Yusuf, they redid it because parts of the sound had faded out for whatever reason. But kudos to Yusuf at the time. He had the platform to allow these different content creators who were experts in this particular type of field and research in this material, helped put out very excellent work. And he would show the enforcement, how to enforce these instruments. And he had like an over 90% success rate. I'm not sure if these materials still work, but he was at the time showing how he discharged debt, creating his private certified checks. And they went through, by the way. Saw him and Yusuf some years ago. For those of you all who don't know, because this information was private, by the way. So keep in mind, this is only certain people were privy to this type of information. So I'm going over the history because I have a good memory and just providing validity for you guys. By the way, Mary Saunders says, I saw the film you asked us to look up, and while the dirt goes over a person's head, changes on the horizon. Yes, that's another excellent documentary. It's very important, especially for those that are involved in holding foreign currencies, that know about the Iraqi dinar, the global currency reset. Some may refer to as the Great Reset. By the way, that's another term that I think the elitists kind of tweaked it a bit, but it's important. It would behoove you to check out that documentary. It's called Changes on the Horizon. There was a part 1 through 3 version, but then someone had uploaded an uncut version, by the way, on YouTube. So you still should be able to find it. It may be under a different name, but if you type in that name, it'll still link you to the documentary. You may have to figure out which one it is. But in the beginning, it talked about the Saint Germain Trust. And then down the road, it gets really good. It gives you a visual understanding of how some of these things came about, by the way. So thank you for sharing that information, Mary. Appreciate you. Says, I was so shocked, but not feeling yet. Thanks, Elle. Glad you finally saw that. I had gone over that documentary numerous times in previous videos. I had even discovered another sub I had spoke to a while ago. She hadn't saw the movie. I think she saw it now. Since I had her personal email, I emailed it to her directly to check out, by the way. But very informative, by the way, documentary to help connect the pieces together. But to get back to the information on subject. So I'm going over the topic of this video is business and law, discussing the private side, how it's the correlation to redemption education, by the way. So I went over those contracts. Furthermore, those contracts that you enter into, the rewards points, travel points you get in the public that are enticing you. These are benefit privileges that are connected to your legal fiction. You're doing business as under the corporate U.S. Jurisdiction, by the way. And I want to say that there's some out there that use a term or thing called sovereign citizen. I don't use that terminology because a citizen is a subject that belongs to a certain jurisdiction or pertains to being a taxpayer that's registered to a particular municipality, by the way. So you guys get the connection. There's a contract legally, by the way. You have to look up the definition to understand their benefits or privileges that pertain to that particular town, city, or municipality that you reside in or you're doing business under. So when they combine that word, sovereign means to be self-governed. That pertains to kings and queens. You can't combine sovereign with it because the definition is the complete opposite of citizen. By the way, when it comes to commoners, for example, look up the definition of the word sovereign. It more so pertains to potentates, diplomats, kings, queens, emperors, monarchs. So that's an oxymoron contradiction. There's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. Someone had broke that down recently. So I looked up, went over the terminology. Those are two separate terms, and you can't combine them. Of course, there's gatekeepers and agents out there that will say that to try to deter people from learning, studying this type of information. But I'm showing you the correlation to business and law with the redemption manual, by the way, and also in the accounting field. So also when you invest in certain types of benefit privileges that are tied to the stock market or the US dollar, your current earnings or future earnings have the potential to be totally wiped out. By the way, someone asked a question earlier on in the chat. I had these notes pre-prepared already. This kind of answers the question why it's important learning this information. So I know there's a lot of gurus, people, there's a lot of infomercials now where people are on YouTube that have content creators that are selling Webull or Robinhood and made good money, a lot more than I have, and kudos to them. But however, I asked the question, even insurance policies, is that attached to your SSN? And what jurisdiction, how you're doing business as is detrimental because of some things that are coming down the road, by the way. But it's important to know how you're engaging in behind the scenes, because major corporations are selling your debt or your name. They're tapping into, and you're not getting the proper cut of that money. That's a form of unjust enrichment, by the way. So just going over, so when you invest in certain types of benefit privileges tied to the stock market or the US dollar, your current earnings or future earnings have the potential to be totally wiped out, even though they said they put security mechanisms allegedly in place of for the stock market. The individual was telling me, was explaining to me, I have to probably get more information if they melt the market up and there's major hyperinflation. And capital controls that pertains to where the banks, if there's a bank holiday where they shut down and they limit the amount of money that you can withdraw from an ATM machine, which happened in Cyprus some years ago and Greece. Just a reference back to the banking crisis that happened in Cyprus some years ago and Greece, where their banks implemented a bank holiday and or capital controls where you can only withdraw a certain amount from the ATM machines. And that's if they have the funds available, by the way. And mind you, if you had big bills, you had to pay like a mortgage or rent, that was in the thousands, but you can only withdraw a certain amount. That can make things difficult where you have to make multiple trips and things. And that could become a nightmare in terms of hyperinflation, by the way. So if you don't believe what I'm saying, look at the nationaldebtclock.org. Look at the amount that's owed. That's in over 28 trillion the last time I checked. And think about if this becomes due for immediate payment, many of the U.S. population or anything tied to the U.S. dollar are going to be screwed in order to pay off that large sum of the national debt. Don't you think the banker trustees are going to require something in return? So just if you get a chance, go to nationaldebtclock.org. If you don't believe what I'm saying, don't take my word for what I'm saying. This is why I give a disclaimer, but I'm going over this information where one can also do their own research as well and see the validity of what I'm going over, by the way. And see, you have to understand you're not getting something for nothing, because behind the curtain, what they're doing, they are securitizing or monetizing your signature with these negotiable instruments that themselves you already signed, can be traded or sold without your awareness. They can, even nowadays, they can be digitized. What they do, Elder told me many years ago, they used to send people's private personal checks back to them through their bank account. They used to send that back. But nowadays, he said they keep them, and then they're double dipping. By the way, they're getting paid like 2 and 3 times. Your bills and things are already prepaid for. They're using your N-Lingus. And there is a process within the movement that I haven't gotten around to utilizing it. There's actually several different processes to recoup that amount that you've lost. If you want to know more about that type of information, by the way, you have to set up a private consultation with me. If you're wondering, I had someone ask me, the instructions should be located in the description section of the video with how to contact me. If you do want to set up a private consultation, just whenever you're ready, you have to email me first, and then I'll go over the instructions from there. Make sure you leave your telephone number so I have a way of contacting you. Then I can work out what schedule you're on, and I try to get those knocked out just like that. By the way, so once I receive the payment, you either Cash App me, PayPal me. I will get in touch with you as soon as possible. By the way, that's if you want to know more in depth. By the way, this is why it's important when you get involved in many of these different types of contracts to to read the disclaimers, the disclosure agreements, the terms and conditions when you sign up for many different types of contracts. And this book, Business Law, by the way, and even in some of the updated versions, talks about different types of contracts. And there's various books from chapters in this book that break down, that specify in that particular subject. They home in on that particular topic itself that pertains to contract law and different types of contracts. By the way, this is a general book that encompasses, of course, this is for legal students that go through law school, or even some finance majors may learn this type of material, because there's elements that overlap with accounting, by the way, because in some chapters of the later versions, even this book talks about different types of insurance, by the way, how you have house insurance, auto insurance, renter's insurance, life insurance, different types of insurances, and that's connected to the securities brokerage field, which gets into overlaps with the accounting finance field. You see how I'm connecting the pieces for you, how these different disciplines overlap with one another. So once again, this is why it's important to always read the disclaimers, disclosure agreements, terms and conditions when you sign up for new contracts. Many of these corporations are using deceptive tactics to keep you in contract without giving you a chance to opt out of their terms and conditions, since they are monetizing, securitizing, making money off you behind the scenes without you being aware. Big money in many cases, and they create derivatives on the stock market. This is a form of unjust enrichment, by the way. And if you know what you're doing properly, there's a way to sue them and sue some, like some have sued debt collectors for harassment when they sell your debt to another bank. By the way, when that original debt was paid off and you didn't sign the contract with that original so-called debt collector, you may have signed it with whoever the original so-called lender was, or creditor, when you're actually the lender, because they're tapping into your N Lingus trust, by the way. Make that clear. So once again, if you go to the nationaldebtclock.org, this will give you a general breakdown of the national debt here in the U.S. And another important book to study that I just went over again is Accounting, where you have a dual ledger system, debits and credits, assets and liabilities. You have accounts payable, accounts receivable. And as that webinar I discussed that Ajamu Bey did with Yusuf El, he talked about the notes payable ledger. He had contacted the finance department for a particular bill instrument when he had utilized a private cashier's check that he created, by the way. And then sometimes they will assist you. The accountant was aware of the private side who worked in this finance department for this particular corporation he contacted, and she stated to him that it would be that type of instrument would be processed or be added as an asset to the notes payable ledger. Don't quote me, something to that effect, by the way. So this shows how accounting is tied in. Another thing, many of those negotiable instruments years ago through the Federal Reserve Bank were supposed to go through a department that was connected to the Treasury called the Treasury Tax and Loan Department. I had a subscriber that told me some years ago he worked for the New York Stock Exchange. By the way, he was a facilitator and told me that the TT&L department used to be located at every small institution, even credit unions, or your mom and pop banks such as Chase, Huntington, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Fifth Third, etc. They're supposed to have a section for treasury management but the problem is that many of these lower level bankers, because the elites high up have compartmentalized this information, they've hidden this. And when individuals try to enforce these instruments, sometimes it's difficult because you have to know what you're doing. And that's the type of research that I do. I'm actually studying a process behind the scenes that can be very time consuming, by the way, when it comes to enforcing these types of instruments, because there were those that wondered whether or not the TDA accounts were real, by the way. And I had showed a while ago, this was, hold up to the camera, an application for those that were wondering about the black card. By the way, I was hearing from a particular private source that you had to have a signature card on file, by the way. But see, they keep this information very secretive, but the application would be right here. And I believe part of this, or the application, is still on the Federal Reserve's website, frbservices.org. But I'm just showing you, the reason I showed that is to show evidence, because I'm tired of hearing the lies, the misconception out there that the Treasury Direct accounts, that's just a generalized term. That's an umbrella term. Some may call it a private account or secret account, but it does exist, and there's different variations of it. But those negotiable instruments many years ago that people were attempting to get to go through, there was an issue where some of the bankers or people may not have known what to do with them. And the investigative journalists at the time who researched this information many years ago said they were passed to different government agencies that may not have had anything to do because they didn't know what to do with some of these negotiable instruments. But there is an easier method that is being kept hidden, by the way. So just putting it out there for those to understand the frustration that I had personally been through myself. And that's all I'll kind of leave it at for the time being. So as I went over, you have this is hidden within the accounting field, by the way. So you have something separate called notes payable, which is a written form of a promissory note. And under this agreement, a borrower obtains a specific amount of money from a lender and promises to pay it back with interest over a predetermined time period, by the way. So give you an idea what the notes payable side, because I went over accounts payable, accounts receivable, because some years ago I met a paralegal, someone who was a member of the Bar Association, that told me he had studied the utilization of using checks off the closed account, because in the Black's Law Dictionary, which I have right behind me, the 6th edition, if you look up closed checking account, it states that there's an account that is used for set-off and adjustment, which no further additions can be made. You're utilizing the private side of the accounting ledger. You see it's on a different ledger. When you have a so-called open account, which the bank is acting as a third party with your in lingus, your straw name, by the way, and then they give you an account number. That's actually like a third party account number. Your social security number is also another type of account number as well, by the way. But what they're doing, they're stepping in place as a third party. But when you have an open account, that's open on the public side and the private side. But those, once that account is closed, they said they stay open forever in the Federal Reserve System. But evidence of this is actually, if you look up the closed checking account, it's in the Black's Law Dictionary, the 6th edition, by the way, legally. So you see how they hid this information within business and law, which I'm kind of going over. There's a correlation because law students have to take this information. And this is what I've researched on my own from doing in-depth forensic investigation, forensic research, by the way. So I want to go over, there's 3 important courses of study. There's actually some more, by the way. Put this over here. There's 3 important courses of study that I'm going over. You have accounting/finance, by the way, which just hold it up to the camera. I'm going over again. You have business and law. These are correlation. And there's a third one I don't have, but I kind of went over it. The securities brokerage field. by the way. Securities brokerage license discipline. Those three disciplines, these different subjects are tie into this information. There's a correlation. These subjects are related. There's 4 subjects related to sovereignty within the business law class I'm going to go over. One of them is called commercial paper, by the way. Okay, these courses are located within these different chapters. Look like the stream paused for a second. These different subjects are located within these different chapters. Okay, someone in the chat, Mary Saunders says, in Virginia, insurance can be outside of the will unless the law is changed. Okay, very interesting. By the way, thank you for that input. It's different laws for different states, so you have to look up your jurisdictions for which state you're in and how you operate, by the way. So going over, you have commercial paper, which generally deals with negotiable instruments, by the way. It's related to this book, Secure Transactions, which deals with UCC financing statements. You have another chapter called Intellectual Property, which deals with copyrights, DBAs, trademarks, fictitious names, etc. You also have a chapter on various types of insurance, in which many may be unaware of, which I touched on earlier. This discipline overlaps with the securities brokerage field, by the way. So there's many may be unaware. Once again, you have a chapter on various types of insurance, which many may be unaware. This discipline overlaps with the securities brokerage license, that course of study. In some textbooks, they go over the holder in due course, wills, estates, and trust. You have to be able to distinguish the difference between the public side education within these courses of study versus how one would operate on the private side. If either crosses path, then sometimes that can be considered commingling, by the way. So as I went over a little bit earlier, you have to be able to distinguish with these disciplines how there's a private side to this. Even though you're learning the public side, there's a private side to this understanding when you come into this knowledge and how one would operate and being private and distinguishing the difference versus the public sector and not commingling based on how you engage in certain types of contracts you get involved with, by the way. Please also keep in mind there are different processes within this redemption education and study courses, by the way. So just to give you guys an idea, some of the various courses of study or different methods. You have discharge of debt. You have status correction. You have the authentication procedure. By the way, I'm reading from these notes I have. You have procedures dealing with DBAs, trademarks. You have a separate process. These are separate subjects. So when you learn this type of information, or I've had people ask me, where do I start from? There are different courses of study. That's why nowadays, because of the advent of technology, you don't have to go like I did many years ago. I had to seek out private meetings through word of mouth. By the way, that was on a need-to-know basis that was private in the city of Detroit. I was one of the younger people there. There was a lot of older people who were learning this type of information. By the way, I was one of the youngest people there. They actually nicknamed me at the time Research John. That was the nickname that I had at the time. John is my first name, of course, by the way. So just going over a little bit of that history. This is a true story. This is how I learned this information. So I sought this out on my own many years ago. I had to be intelligent enough to know that this existed when I found out from this other meeting that I was informed by a source that I had, by the way. So you have DBAs, trademarks, you have these different courses of study, affidavit, a default, judgment of estoppel, how to do small claims, civil suits against debt collectors, child support, mortgage discharge, removing your house from property tax rolls. I know a guy that knows how to do that. That's a really advanced process, by the way, highly advanced. It involves, having some things in place. 9 to 5 paycheck recoupment through the IRS/Treasury. Yes, there is a way to get a refund on your paycheck. By the way, there's a YouTube channel, by the way, when I went over some of the top names that are out there, by the way, there's a particular channel that I know of. They actually work with paralegals, and they actually have a process where they know how to recoup your paycheck from your job. By the way, did you know when you go to work, you can actually, you can get a refund off that. Believe it, as crazy as that may sound. I told a friend of mine about this. It blew him away. So this is another way. We're not, because you have to understand, when they gave us fiat currency, they took away when they removed the lawful currency, the concept back in the early 1930s during the Great Depression, and they came out with public policy, HJR 192, Public Law 73-10. They had to provide a remedy and recourse, by the way. And since you're being paid in fiat, it's like you're actually getting less. So there's a way. And then there's a private side. You know how if you look at a dollar bill, it says legal tender for public and private debts. There's another side to that saga without going in depth. But just to show you guys the level of knowledge that I have, some of these types of things, I can go more in depth if you, set up a private consultation. If you want to know what I know or more information about that, I can explain what specific channel. I can lead you to that source. By the way, I'm not just saying the name. That's part of my intellectual property and proving the research that I've done and the knowledge that I have. And this information was presented to me some years ago by my older cousin who studied this type of information. And he lives down in the DC area, by the way, where I'm further up north, he's south. And he gave me an audio. That process was actually created. I'm aware, I won't say the name because that may point you. But if you want to know information about that, I can share those types of things, by the way. So these are different subjects that pertain to this type of information, dealing with the redemption free. I'm just showing this manual in general, by the way. It's important to get the basics down. So want to say that's pretty much it so far. If you guys, just to let you know, if you all have any questions, even though I didn't put Q&A in there, if you like the information that I went over, don't forget the thumbs up. But if you have questions right now, don't hesitate to chime in the chat. Do my level best to try to answer some of you guys' questions now that I can. If they're too sensitive, you may have to set up a private consultation with me where I can send you PDF files. I've got webinars and things of that sort to add validity, by the way, to what I'm going over. NVX says, I was following some other channel for redemption process. I only got as far as a name change, but don't know the next steps. I would like to be educated on the process. Okay. Yeah, then definitely you probably may need to set up a private consultation. Some of the name change, I've done that process. There's two different types. There's one that's public, a name change, and there's another version that's a lawful name correction. And it's important for one to understand how you would utilize the other side and how you would follow it. I would be able to explain that in a private consultation and how you would be able to enforce that properly, legitimately, and have it established on public record, by the way. And I will be able to go more in detail how you would operate down the road. So, that information, yeah, that is possible. There's a way to operate. by the way. So let me know if you guys like the information that I went over so far. The title of this video is pertaining to, I wanted to show the connection to business and law, the private side of this redemption education. I want to illustrate the correlation, the two together. So this pretty much wraps up. I'm surprised. I had a lot of notes prepared, but I'm kind of tired. NVX says, yes, sir, I will definitely look into consultation. No problem. So whenever you're ready, whenever you get a chance, I can go more in depth. I do have paperwork still. I have filed, by the way, I have templates, and I believe I do have a template that pertains to the lawful name correction already. So even if you're in a different state, you can just adjust it or tweak it to whatever jurisdiction you're in, whatever state. And I can go from there, how you would enforce it, what you would need to do, and what would make it powerful, and how you would operate it, by the way. So this pretty much wraps up things so far. I just wanted to go over, a good friend of mine contacted me. In case you're wondering, this shirt I have right here, I pulled it out. This was this part of my connections to the music industry from some years ago. This was a group that I was connected to. I got this down in Orlando. They had a previous version. They built up at the time. We were in talks with Bad Boy Records, Jermaine Dupri's record label, So Def. We just never got signed. This group that I was part of, I hadn't talked to my friend in a while. He contacted me earlier. That's why I would have come before you guys earlier, by the way. And then I was discussing something with another friend, by the way. But this used to be their website some years ago. I had got this shirt. They did a show. I was down in Orlando, Florida. One of the members of the group, I thought he was moving down to Florida, but he had been kicked out at one time. This group that I was connected with at the time, many years ago, by the way, the other member who was part of the group, his father was one of the managers of Eminem's group many years ago called D12, by the way. So we were connected to Eminem's Shady Records, by the way. But our group itself, our friend was building our brand up and trying to stretch out, because one of the strategies in marketing back then, if you're a group of up and coming rapper, nowadays it's a lot different. You know, people can go viral off of YouTube. There's other ways to build up your following. You would do shows and stuff like that. So I'm just kind of going over my connections. Like, we were real close to getting signed by a major label. Like I say, to reiterate, we were in talks with Bad Boy Records. Of course, that's Puff Daddy. By the way, we were also, from what I remember, from what my friend stated, they were in discussion with So Def. And there's groups you may have never heard of that just never got signed to major labels. You got to think, for example, were some of the groups that were signed to Bad Boy. You had the group 112. You had a R&B group called Toto. So there's some groups you may have never even heard about, but we had built a following in the city of Detroit back around 2005, before the radio station, when the hip hop station used to be 105.9 before it switched at the time a couple times. Can't remember exactly which station. They gave a shout out to me. My rap name back then was J Trey, by the way. It's one of my Facebook accounts. I use J Trey. That was my name in the group. They gave a shout out to me on the radio, by the way, here locally in the city of Detroit. Like I say, this is in the mid 2000s. By the way, they had also this group that I was part of gained a big following, by the way. So I had to pull out my CDs. Okay. Just to kind of go over. But this was the logo. They had one of the hottest mixtapes. I think this was around 2006. This was you see the name, the Rat Pack. And this was the official, this was the CD, this was the mixtape. So in the city of New York, it's hard. This shows how elite the group that I was part of was. You have to be hot to go to another city, especially New York, which is one of the fashion capital. It's one of the original, how can I put it, the birthplace of hip hop. Some argue with whether it's Brooklyn or the Bronx. I'm not sure exactly. It's a lot of history, but this was like one of the hottest mixtapes. I think this was around '05 or '06. By the way, this was one of the. He told me at the time one of the hottest mixtapes. I knew about Dirty Harry back in the day. I knew a DJ when I went to school in Columbus, Ohio, named DJ Shamil. He used to make mixtapes for me. He was from Brooklyn. He represented Bed-Stuy, which I learned many years later is Bedford-Stuyvesant. I've never been to New York. I like to go. I used to rap myself many years ago. My cousin, who was actually signed to the rapper Scarface at the time, she had been in the studio with Bone Thugs and Harmony. She told me I had an East Coast style when she heard me freestyle for her many years ago, by the way. So just going over this information, big shout out to my friend reaching out. It's been a minute. Just wanted to go over. I was going to do a video separately on this in the past, but I figured what better time to go over. This was the original group right here. By the way, so I have the CD in here. And if you're wondering why you don't see me at the time, I was actually part of the group. I was kind of similar to the group Bone Thugs and Harmony, where they had like a fourth or fifth member. You don't fifth member where you don't see the photo. He was related to one of the members of the group. And that's kind of like how I was. So had they got signed, my friend stated he would have called me. I was basically best friends with one of the lead organizers of the group. A big shout out to Bird at the time. There was a mixtape that I was on, by the way. Let's see if I can find. Oh, boy. This is, let's see. Okay. That's some. I see some. I'm gonna get back to the chat. I see some of you guys made some statements, but I don't have it somewhere around here. I had a photo, but I was on a mixtape that Free from, I think, from back in the day, from 106 in Park, actually promoted, was on. I had a track on there. I did a cappella. And Bird, who his father at the time I was told was one of the managers of Eminem's group D12, he got me in the studio, recorded. And there's a guy, artist, pretty well known in the city of Detroit, a musician, Darrell Campbell. Big shout out to him, by the way. I think his name is acknowledged on this particular album. He did some work, by the way, and some of the production, by the way. So this was the group. Of course, this is some of the logo. This is one of the older mixtapes. This was the shirt, Rat Pack for Life. By the way, this was the website many years ago, by the way. This is one of the other logos. Of course, it's modeled after the original Rat Pack. We did a show at UCF, University of Central Florida. So I was reminiscing on that many years ago. Big shout out to my friend Tarmel, T-Mel at the time, Cool Breeze, aka Fonzie of the pack, for that experience. It's definitely a lifetime. Big shout out to King High School, even though I went to Cooley on the west side, rep both sides of the city, east side, west side, much love. I've lived on the east side of Detroit before, by the way. So I'm not just a west sider, but I did grow up on the west side most of my life. I am originally also from Cleveland, Ohio. So I rep 216, also 313, by the way. So for those out there that know, just kind of going over, putting it out there. Darkman X313 says, what about removing a judgment? By the way, good question. Says what, however, let me see, what type of judgment are you looking at removing, Darkman? Because I do have, there's a paperwork I was actually studying recently that pertains to the 1099s, by the way, that deals with discharge. It's also connected. You can utilize for court judgments. You might need to use the W9 form to request the taxpayer identification number from the lawyer or judge or whoever you're dealing with on the case. But however, there's the GSA bonds, the GSA process that stands for General Services Administration. I did have a consultation where I had to get assistance for. I know some people more advanced, but I was able to assist the gentleman with his questions that pertain to the GSA bonds, by the way, which is a highly advanced process, by the way, and is used when they lock, just in terms of locking people up and stuff like that. Without going in depth, I have some templates and things that pertain to that show this information is very real. That there was one guy I met some years ago. He could even get people out of jail, but he said he was particular. He didn't want to just be getting anybody out because this information is so powerful, by the way, that you can get people actually out of prison if you know what you're doing. There was a private source that stated some years ago, you don't want to do power of attorney. You have to be careful. You may want to do limited power of attorney, because he said if that person gets back in trouble again with the law and they come lock them up because you took power of attorney over them, they're locking you up as well because you did power of attorney. So you have to be careful. In some instances where lawyers might give you a hard time, where you've got to get the paperwork to the prisoner, you might have to go through an attorney to have whoever you're trying to get out to have them sign the paperwork, stuff like that. I don't know. I'm not an expert when it comes to that category, but just giving you an idea of how strict in the different games, you can imagine that these gatekeepers real high up play. So yeah, you can get rid of judgments. Depends on what type of judgment. If you're still watching, Dark Man, what type of judgment are you talking about? Are you trying to remove, get rid of, by the way? Because everything, if it pertains to the courts, a lot of cases deals with money. If you're there for settlement and closure, you're trying to you want to close the case out because, of course, they're charging. When they say they're charging you, they're charging your bond, which is connected part of your exemption account, by the way, if there's money involved. But what type of judgment are you referring to? Is there a lien that's placed? If there is a lien that's placed, you may want to look into the GSA process, by the way, into getting that lien removed. But it can possibly tie in with the discharge, can possibly help out. It says Gene Keating said, charge it to the judge who issued the order and discharge it through the Treasury. Yeah, that's a particular process itself. You have to be careful with. I know there's some people that use the Form 56 where they'll assign the judge on the case or whoever they're dealing with as a fiduciary, but in some instances they don't want to they don't want to take a submissive role because they know what they're doing. They want to make money off your estate and keep you in the position that you're in. It says from an accident I did have, name was on the truck. Okay. Okay. That is a good question, but you may want to you can go that route, by the way, but you got to have your Form 56. It's good to also fill out a power of attorney form with the IRS, by the way. Power of attorney, there's different groups out there. In case you're unaware, there's groups on Facebook that I know of that help each other. By the way, they try to help assist each other, people that are related to this information. There may be other groups out there that are on other platforms, like Discord was one of them, by the way. So if they're trying to come after you, if there's a lien, you may want to use definitely the 1099-A process up front. You can close that out. There's a way to recoup the funds back, or you should be able to. And with that, you can put the judge's name, the case number, and the name. However, when you're utilizing when you appoint them as the fiduciary, sometimes what's going on, they don't want to step in the role. They may not know what they're doing, because you also have to know how to give them instructions. By the way, you may have to know how to instruct them. You have to have an instructional letter, kind of like when I went over earlier talking about how some gatekeepers or public side officials, bankers didn't know what to do with the checks that will say EFT only for discharge of debt, do not ACH. And they would try to ACH it, and then that would cause the check to bounce, and person would get reported to check systems, or the corporation would process it a certain way. Then they would try to double dip and get more revenue out of it. By the way, this is a letter that this paralegal was sent. So when you learn, you actually, because you are the lender, you are actually the creditor, by the way. So there's a way to operate, and these are things I can share some templates that I have if you decide to set up private consultation or whatever, just up to you. But hopefully I've helped answer your question so far. Say sorry and thanks, family. Okay, got it. Good Time says, anyone live in Iowa in here? Oh, okay. So I'm getting ready to wrap things up. This is a Q&A, last call. If you guys have any questions, statements, or concerns out there, this is the best time to reach me. By the way, I wanted to try to address you guys, let you all know I'm still here. Want to try to give you guys information. If you may not see me for a while, I'm not trying to get all the limelight, all the glory. There are other YouTube channels to provide validity. There are different processes and procedures behind this type of information. I went over Yusaville earlier. Jonah Bays lately, he's got a YouTube channel. He's been going live quite a bit. Big shout out to the work that he's doing. He's been teaching about trust law, and he does things connected to the Moors. So some people are apprehensive about that. I won't go into all that. Everybody has to do their own evaluation or whatever, because there's different types of groups out there, and there's different procedures. And I think you can blend different processes, contrary to popular belief. But he stated sometimes if a guru or an instructor has a specific process, he may not know how that process blends with another process. So it's up to one that has to do the homework and research and become knowledgeable enough to know how to mix that process or procedure together, how to blend that. But I know a default process dealing with, I can go more in depth. And I've talked about this when I do a lot of my private consultations, because one hot topic, there's those out there that teach about the national passport process. That's a different process. So there's different study courses and learning this type of information, because they can be time consuming with how to get the 4-star, 5-star passport. But it's important before you apply for that, how are you conducting business? Are you demonstrating that you're operating a certain way? Because if you're operating, you're very public, you're very statutory, you might not get that 4 or 5-star. It's a reason you're gonna be stuck at the 3-star. By the way, so you got to know these types of things, and you got to stay consistent with that as well. By the way, so just putting it out there for you guys. One of the first things I say you all need to do in the movement is cancel your voter registration. I know it sounds contrary to popular belief, but I have some notes, by the way, and I can actually go over that information if you guys want to know. You guys want me to go over that. By the way, I think it's very important, because a lot of people ask me, what is the first step? And a lot of times they attach that to your driver's license, by the way, which that's an adhesion contract. That's putting you, tying you in to being a U.S. person, U.S. citizen. That's making you subjective, by the way, to these other possible traps out here. Remember, I went over the benefit privileges earlier. You can go back and watch this video again. Some of those traps that they set apply, and when they're not giving you compensation properly, that's a form of unjust enrichment. If they didn't notify you, they're making money behind your back. And this is, in some instances, how some debt collectors have been sued in small claims court. I heard there was a guy suing them, winning multiple judgments, by the way. But I think both his parents had a legal background, so they coached them, trained them on what to do. And heard it out. I don't know his name, but he was making big money suing debt collectors, by the way. I think Jonah Bay told that story too, by the way, one of his radio shows. Akeem is another teacher, instructor. He has a YouTube channel. I recommend. He's highly, highly advanced by the way, does very good work. He knows he goes over, he does screen captures where he reads through the material, which is very important. I know I need to probably do more screen capture videos so you guys can see the validity of what I go over. It's important to look up the terminology. I've gone over the definitions, why that is very important, by the way, to help you understand, connect the pieces together, by the way. And there's Don Kalam out there. He goes over like business lines of credit too. He talks about the 1099 OID, American. He has like shown the American Express Black Card, which that's a different type of Black Card, by the way. But his channel is called Don Kalam, by the way. I think he's based out in Florida, but he's done seminars abroad. You have James C. Lovett, which is a channel like mine. You have Enlightened Luciferian that talks about stuff related to this type of work. Now, some jurisdictions, I heard they're giving people a hard time with filing UCC. So it's been brought to my attention recently by a private source that I've known for a very long time, stated to me it's depends on, to get it accepted, the type of verbiage that you have in there, the language. When I went over this book, by the way, called Business and Law, there's a chapter called Secure Transactions. You want to look up, there's videos on YouTube called look up Secure Transactions, and you want to use the verbiage that's related, by the way, and structuring your paperwork. You might have to change the names, and they removed the slot where you used to put the account number as far as being your birth certificate number, social security number. They removed that because, see, they're also trying to hide this information too, by the way. So just putting it out there, this is where you go a step further when you're studying and learning this type of information, by the way. With that being said, this is the last call once again. If you all have any more questions, statements, or concerns, don't hesitate to chime in. By the way, I said I was going to go over why one of the first steps why you should get rid of the voter registration. On my second backup channel, the first video, I didn't have that title in there, but I actually went over a lot of that information, which I didn't discuss previously, by the way. I can go over. Okay. Here's one of the reasons I was taught to do this many years ago. If you guys, some of you all don't know the story, I've mentioned this before. When I went to my first meeting, by the way, it was on the east side of Detroit. There was a sister representing the Nuwaubian Nation of Moors, by the way, and she stated this is one of the first things that everyone needed to do at the time. She was an activist, by the way, and this was back in 2004, specifically during that year. She went over, many of our grandparents were taught wrong. They fought for civil rights, which she said are animal rights. There's a difference between civil rights and human rights. So what they unknowingly fought for was under a civil contract, which is civil rights, which she mentions also animal rights. She said they should have been fighting for human rights, which she used as an example. Malcolm X, Malik El Shabazz, rest in peace, who was more so for human rights. Remember, Martin Luther King was a civil rights leader, but Malcolm X, the way he spoke, he was more so for human rights. There was a difference, even though before the two died, their beliefs started to line up with one another. By the way, another reason is your unalienable right under the Constitution, that this is a form of contract. She stated through the Homestead Act, when you are a registered voter, the state of Michigan, or maybe this might apply to other states, they have the power of attorney over you. This gives them power of attorney. This is why the voter registration is connected to the driver's license. It's an adhesion contract. This gives them power of attorney, by the way. My other light went out. So I see Darkman X313 says, I didn't vote after watching Hellraiser on registering with the right attachments. Oh yeah, that's another brother I forgot about. Big shout out to the work Hellraiser's doing. So I mentioned other channels to show you guys. I'm not in it for the limelight or for the glory, but I just want to illustrate there are different processes. There's different procedures out there. So you got Hellraiser has a channel. You got Jonah Bay, Yusaville, Akeem El, by the way, which I think I highly recommend. I like the work that he does. Very phenomenal brother with the work that he does. Who else? Don Kalam. I follow some of his work sometimes. James C. Lovett does good work over there. Lately, he had been talking about, I saw stuff dealing with the passport. Kudos to where he's updating. Enlightened Luciferian. Who else can I think of? Tex Mason, by the way, has put out good work. Check out his channel called Tex Mason. I think he's from Ohio, just like I am. He's shown like his BC, his birth certificate before, by the way. So check out his channel to give you guys an idea, by the way. So I went over the Homestead Act. This puts you in a certain jurisdiction. It's a permanent lien placed over your all-cap straw man. She used to reference to California Election Code Section 22 that the registration of a voter is permanent for all purposes during his or her life. California Election Code Section 22. You can look it up if it's still online. And this applies to other states, by the way. Until it is terminated, the government does not tell you when you accept these contracts. They are voluntary, by the way. She used to mention, I forget. And when you are involved in these contracts, this is what gives them the ability to summons you to jury duty, or when you sign, your parents sign you up for the Selective Service Act. This is how they can legally draft you and get away with it, even though you have a right to voluntarily refuse those types of things, by the way. But there's people that may not be aware. In addition, the state government takes out money out of your birth certificate trust when you're a registered voter and uses that money to build new buildings, roads, projects, stuff like that. Like I said, they're not giving you a proper cut, just like the corporations tap into your bills when you're struggling to make it. And this is a form of unjust enrichment, by the way. They're not giving you proper compensation, by the way, which they should. And they're not providing full disclosure either. That's why you have HIPAA laws under the Privacy Act and things. It's just so many egregious activities that are taking place. This is beyond unreal. Looking for some other notes that I had, by the way. Well, that's pretty much it, guys. So once again, this is the last call. If you guys have any questions, those out there that are still watching, don't hesitate to chime in. I'm getting ready to shut things down. Darkman X313 says that's why they want people to vote every 4 years. Yeah, I had another subscriber that broke down how the census thing they were doing. That's another contract too, how that's tied in, and he strategically broke that down, how they strategically implement that around election time. And he mentioned like how you put a consensus together. It was pretty deep, by the way, but I understood it. And another thing, they're making you a resident, and it's important to look up that term, look up the definition. And when you have an address, I heard Bishop Jakes, the Bishop T.D. Jakes, I heard his daughter mention they don't receive public mail in the interview. And I said, yeah, they probably know when people have deep pockets or they're famous or part of the music industry. Like I kind of went over, by the way, this group that I was part of, by the way. Big shout out to my homie reaching out to me earlier. That's why I didn't come before you guys earlier, by the way. Some people know about stuff like this when they have deep pockets, real high up, by the way. I was listening to an interview. I can't remember. It was very brief. They were interviewing Bishop T.D. Jakes. One of his daughters had mentioned at the time that they didn't receive mail. Now, I know some of you are thinking that they use a mailbox or private mailbox, etc. Maybe, but when you receive free mail, like that you don't pay for, that's a form of a benefit privilege. Like I said earlier, you're not getting something for nothing, by the way. And there's a process I was referring to. I mentioned this in a previous video I saw on James C. Lovett's channel where they were using this procedure where they send stuff back. And I want to say I know what he's talking about, and I believe I mastered that particular procedure, and I can point to a story where there was a lot of so-called residents or citizens in Detroit that had used or were aware of this particular method. I could reference to. I can tell some other stories, but I think that that's too sensitive to go into the details about, because with one of the last things I was going to go over, by the way, I wanted to warn you guys, the reason I don't go over, I reframe or hold back. Let me shift gears for a moment and let my faithful, loyal subscribers know I do sincerely do my level best to bring you all accurate information. However, certain details I present could bring danger or harm to myself. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Certain things I've shown in the past, I don't really go over as much anymore. But I felt like I wanted to show you guys, because I hear so many of the lies similar to Mythbusters, I wanted to show you guys evidence. That's why when you see me show the card, the application, things, I'm showing you guys I can back up what I talk about, by the way. And I can go more further, say if you were in person, by the way, or when I've done private consultations and things. But I want to tell you with great certainty, in my personal opinion, this high-powered information I presented in the past has made me a target by certain individuals. There are those agents and gatekeepers, bad actors, minions, and shields and villains out there, and underlings who have nefarious intentions, by the way, who don't mean well, who might watch this channel or other channels. So just always keep that in mind. Be careful who you share information with. Evaluate, say if you are someone who's advanced or you have someone that's inquiring, you have explain to them the do's and don'ts, what to watch out for. That there's these agents out there, and there's some of them may not work for the government, but maybe just they're mean-spirited people. They don't want people to be free or access their freedom, by the way. So just keep that in mind, because I've had subscribers who have confided in me, knowing that because of my experience, when they ask me for trustworthy content or more advanced educators like what I went over, they know I will provide them highly accurate details, by the way. This is reassurance I provide that gives people confidence in not only studying the material I present myself or others that are more advanced than myself that I recommend, by the way. So just going over that, just keep that in mind, by the way. So I appreciate you all for joining me, by the way. NVX says, is the revaluation still expected to happen? I have my dinar and dawn. Yeah, it's a good question. I say hold tight. I think we are getting closer, by the way, to answer your question to that taking place, by the way. Don't give up. NVX says, we appreciate it, brother. Appreciate you for joining, by the way. Says, I need to do this to secure my son's future. Definitely, no doubt, by the way. And that's a wonderful thing if you're a parent and you see what's going on out here, you see what they're doing. And there's a lot of people who are already advanced or at a certain level in this, and it would behoove you to teach your children, to set them up, because I'm a Generation Xer. And I was listening to a podcast from a brother who's going by the name Angry Man. Some of his channels, one of his channels was called Boss Talk Radio. He had another channel called The Street Conservative. I think just recently he changed the name and rebranded his channel. And I listened to his podcast or his YouTube videos. He does live sometimes. And he mentioned he's a Generation Xer just like myself. And he talked about an interesting correlation with the baby boomers and how a lot of them didn't really pass generational wealth down to us, by the way. And how our generation, us being the Xers, how we were in the middle and how we're in the middle being stuck with the old generation, the cons, the pros, some of the pros and cons versus the millennials and the Generation Y. And if you do have the ability, you do want to teach your children, you want to set their future up, because you don't want them to suffer or go through what I went through, like with my father. By the way, I was going to do a separate video talking about this, because my biological father is down in the Cleveland, Ohio area, and I had some relatives some years ago were trying to get me to move back down there at the time, and I decided not to. I stayed up here. It was my father who ultimately decided to move my family. Just to give you all a little background on my personal business, by the way, that's why I'm in Detroit, but I spent my first 5 years, a good portion of my life in Cleveland. I didn't spend my first Christmas until '97 in Detroit, a couple years after my grandmother passed away in Cleveland, Ohio, by the way. And it was my dad's decision, and I didn't want to move originally. You know, I love Cleveland so much at the time, but you know, when you move to different state, different city, you meet new friends, you develop relationships, close ties, by the way, lifelong relationships, let me add. And it has its, you know, pros and cons. I still love my family, so I rep, you know, show love to the 216 area and beyond, 313, of course, all day, every day. But you know, so I just want to tell a story that sometimes parents, when they don't make the right decisions, they can set their children up and make it very difficult for them to fight to try to get out of poverty. Because I'm learning more about financial education and studying these different videos that they put out here that give you know, that provide financial literacy. There's a lot of new YouTubers popping up. By the way, there's awesome channels that teach about cryptocurrencies, how to invest your money, how to create multiple streams of income. And I want to say, in my father's situation, based on some of the bad decisions he made, and I told my cousin this, I'm not the type to point the finger, but when parents, they don't make the right decisions, they can set their children up for a life of poverty. And I could never imagine what I had to go through as an adult and what I experienced and learning about the private sector, learning about the elites. I was stunned beyond my wildest imagination, and what I had to go through, and then not really having nobody there that feels like they have your back when your community is broken apart. It's stated that if you look at indigenous communities or different ethnic groups around the world, a lot of people have an elder, somebody they can confide into that can provide wisdom on life, by the way, and how to secure one's future. So I want to say, because of that, if I ever get out of this rut or get to the point where I'm totally financially stable, I'm never going to forget this, what I had to go through. I will try to come back and help, but wasn't really in a position because of something that happened to my dad. He had, I may address this in another video down the line, but some years ago when I was in high school, he was diagnosed with a mental disorder, by the way. Some of my neighbors on the street at the time noticed some things. They used to ask me some odd, peculiar questions many years ago, and then I revealed to them, and I said, yeah, he was taking medication. I don't know what happened. One of my older cousins, who was like a street gangster, who's connected to the streets down there, told me he believed him and his mother, which was my dad's older sister, believed that he was poisoned. Now, I don't have no way of knowing this. My cousin said, and given the disclaimer at the time, because my father was an ordained minister in the Pentecostal Church of God in Christ denomination. It's one of the reasons I didn't follow in his footsteps. I wasn't built for that, by the way. But I have strong ties. I will never forget my roots, my connections, the morals and values that my parents instilled in me. By the way, has its pros and cons. By the way, I was sheltered, and he moved us to a city of Detroit, which is a more fast-paced city than Cleveland, was more hustle and bustle. You had to be street smart, mentally tough, by the way. So I had to develop mental toughness, because I had people try me in the past. So it was like I was a lion. I mean, not a lion, a gazelle thrown in the middle of a jungle, a zebra surrounded by lions, hyenas, people trying to get over on you, fast paced, a lot of con artists, people trying to take advantage of you. And I had to learn this as I was young, as I was coming up, because I didn't have any older cousins that I could lean upon. I actually stayed with a street gangster some years ago. My friends actually contacted me today. His older cousin gave me an opportunity, and a good opportunity some years ago where I learned life skills, by the way. And it's things that he went over, similar if you ever watched the show Wire years ago, if you're familiar with that. Since I was raised a preacher kid, I grew up a church boy, a mama's boy. It was like a Poindexter, what they call nowadays an educated lane, this, that, and other. But I have another side because I had to develop balance, by the way. But in getting back on topic, you're doing the right thing when you teach your children the proper type of information. If you can set them up for financial freedom, so they don't never have to struggle again or worry about certain things, because there's things that they may run into years later that they may not be able to be prepared to get themselves out of. I was in some dangerous situations. I had my father in my life at the time. I didn't have anybody to protect me. Of course, I couldn't lean on my mom, because in the Black community, a lot of Black boys, Angry Man talks about this, by the way. That's why I brought up his podcast. A lot of Black men, when they grew up in single parent households raised by single mothers, or I had my dad for a number of years, but he was ordered to leave the household because of his mental condition at the time when I was still in high school. By the way, I hadn't even graduated yet. And you had to be so-called man of the house that you may not be prepared for. Now, mind you, because he was a preacher in the church, he was never into guns, unlike other groups that their fathers take them hunting, or they go through a rite of passage, by the way, or like ancient times, what develops you into being a man. I never went through. I had to learn in a different way. I had to go through some of those types of things. And on the journey in that pathway, I crossed landmines, treacherous waters, by the way. So you're doing the right thing if you teach your kids this type of information. You warn them ahead of time. You teach them street smarts, book smarts. It's important to talk to them, by the way. And that's the reason why I have an introvert side, by the way. And you have to develop that defense mechanism, because you feel like nobody looked out for you, and you were surrounded like you were a gazelle unprotected in the jungle, or you were a calf, and you had to deal with treacherous animals around you, snakes, hyenas, alligators. If you tried to take a sip of water, you had to watch out for the gators, by the way. And that's what I kind of had to go through, being a preacher kid, a church boy, a mama's boy, by the way. So I had to develop mental toughness. And I learned, hearing messages that were preached in the church many years ago by pastors. And I spoke to a subscriber, by the way, about this. And we talked from time to time. And I said, there's a lot of children who are abandoned. There's a rejection spirit in the Black community. There's a spirit of rejection. There's abandonment, which needs to neglect. And this cycle, there's not enough, I think, fathers or mentors in the community, because there's so many children being born out of wedlock. So many, both men and women, that are abandoning their responsibilities, by the way. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody specifically. I'm just saying, so when a child has to grow up in this type of environment, by the way, it can make things a lot harder, tougher for them, where no one never shared with them how to purchase a house, or went over these things, or how to deal with being mentally tough, having the proper street smarts. And when you're raised in certain environments and you grew up a certain way. So just giving that background about myself, that's why I carry myself the way that I do. And, learning from those experiences, you definitely want to do the right thing. You're doing the right thing. And that's a wonderful thing, teaching your kids this information to secure their future, by the way. So big shout out to you all. Sonia Urea says, do you think student loans and mortgages are going to be forgiven? Yeah, that's actually already happening, Sonia, to answer your question. I was actually contacted several times for one of my student loans, by the way. And I think they had a certain amount of money from the CARES Act that was still designated that may have carried on. And I heard that Biden wants to do that. So yeah, if you had an opportunity, you can, I think definitely they're taking care of that, by the way. That's a wonderful thing, I think, when it comes to that. So hopefully I answer your question. So with that being said, guys, I appreciate your time. Everyone out there who's continued to stay subscribed to Dorsey's Resource, who joined me. If you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me. I'm on Facebook. Of course, I'm on Twitter. I am on Instagram, I think at Dorsey's _ resource 2019 Instagram. That's my Instagram handle. I might have it in the description box under the video. That's my more laid back side. Whenever I'm on the ground, by the way, you know, I'm chilling over there. I post like different, you know, maybe memes or photos of myself or music. By the way, it's my laid back side. My Twitter is my more conservative side. By the way, if you want to follow me over there, I do have a Facebook, by the way, but because I mentioned, because of a lot of the censorship that's going on, I do recommend, in my humble opinion, having a backup, getting on other social media platforms. I'm also on Minds.com. I do have an account, Dorsey's Resource Channel, on Minds.com. By the way, I can type that in the chat, Minds.com. You want to follow me over there. The link should be in the description box. I'm also on Parler.com. Parler is back up. By the way, you know, that's like another version of Twitter. I did hear today there's a couple newer social media sites that are launching, by the way. So, you know, appreciate you. Sonia says, thank you, very informative. Appreciate you all for joining once again. I'm your host, John Dorsey, doing business as John Dorsey at Dorsey's Resource. Once again, if you want to follow me, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, at Dorsey's Resource. Obviously, I'm on YouTube, on Minds.com. Down the road, if anything ever happened, as a backup, I'm on Brighteon. I'm also have a Rumble account. I don't have any videos uploaded over there, but you might see some stuff down the road just in case anything happened over here as a backup. Appreciate you all for joining. Mary Saunders says, thanks so much for being here for us. Appreciate you, Mary. Thank you for the encouragement. By the way, the positive words and the encouragement. I'll leave you with these cliches. The marathon will continue. Real legends never die. Out there, stay woke. Be blessed. Peace. Deuces until next time. Appreciate you, Dark Man. Peace, God. Thumbs up. I'm out.